Every entrepreneur has been there. Growing pains,
Obstacles make
to
you
growth
stronger.
gains.
It's the challenges that cause us to level up.
I'm your host, Alicia Domenico.
The quicker they start turning to make money, you make money, Zoom Rails make money, we're all happy. I have no problem that if a salesperson was the highest paid person in the company, actually I want that. That's, if you're making money, I'm making money, and you're maintaining the relationship, that's all I can ask for.
This is big, and every company goes through it. When you want to scale your sales, but you're aware of all the ways it could go wrong, your company needs sales professionals who can reliably get the job done without losing time and while reliably making you more money than the cost of hiring them. The problem is, the sales lifetime of a rep in your organization is often short and the turnover is very high. It's typical that most salespeople leave organizations within 3 to 9 months. So how do you get more sales in the door without having a revolving door on the sales team? That's the question we're trying to answer today. Let's get into it. You start to think about it like this. There's got to be a time or some key indicators that would let me know when to invest in a new sales rep. And not only in just the first new sales rep, but what's the ratio going to be of sales to employees that you need in order to achieve that growth? When do I add more sales reps? And once you've been doing this for a while, the amount of time that you spend in training someone and how long they're likely to stay or how long they do stay is a genuine fear for most company leaders. Not only because you care about your team, but also you're never really going to get that scale if you can't keep a bench. One of the things you might wrestle with is how long do I take to onboard? What are the activities that I reliably do to onboard somebody? I think people really wrestle with the question of training and how much training is too much training to provide at the outset, that it won't be worthwhile that they stay, or what kind of a ladder can I give people that makes them feel like here's some preliminary training to get out and do it, but try it and then we'll refine and give you more knowledge as you stay with us longer. And of course, as an ex-teacher, I can say that who they were as a high school and public school student, they probably are bringing to your workforce, but is there support for them to be a good learner in your workforce? So what works in terms of training, and how do you scale that across all of these different learner formats? And then the questions don't stop once a rep is onboarded. Then you also have to start thinking about retention too. What's the right pay and commission structure to keep a rep around for the long run? Should you offer equity as part of the package? Ultimately, I think figuring this out takes time. You don't necessarily need to know all the answers when you just get started. After all, the rule in entrepreneurialism is fail faster, isn't it? And the reason why we say fail faster is because mistakes are learning opportunities. As you'll hear, my guest in this episode, despite all his many accomplishments, doesn't have it all figured out either. But he's preparing to enter the US market and has done a lot of thinking about how to scale his sales team. I think hearing about his decision-making process will help you with your own.
I'm Marc Milewski. I'm the CEO of Zoom Rails. We've been a payments company for 4.5 years. Started it in a small room in Prince Edward Island by myself. And then quickly, my two other co-founders, Miles and Marcel, joined me. And now we're completely self-funded and 45 people ready to enter the United States.
Amazing. And so that's your goal. Your next big audacious goal is that you want to hit the United States and move out of Canada?
Well, yeah, we actually have what I consider the best platform in all of Canada for moving money. And we went to the United States. So to do that, you have to sort of make relationships with banks and infrastructure down there. And we did it with Fiserv, Fiserv, not to be confused with a vaccine company, who's the largest financial technological platform in the States. And so we're what they call a PayFac. So we spent about a year doing the integrations, the compliance and all that. And literally come Jan 1, it's pedal to the metal to start selling in the States, because now we have everything technically set up to start operating there.
So you've grown. You were a staff of 1. Now you're a staff of 45. You've hired sales reps along the way. How do you know when it's time to invest in hiring a sales rep?
If you want the honest opinion, I have one sales guy. That's my founder. We took a product-led approach. I'm technically if you looked at my resume over time, I've been in payments and financial services for about 15 years. I started in sales, but I moved to product because I thought I'd look at how most people sold, and I thought, well, this is just regurgitating what someone else told you, and no one really understood how to pitch value. And I have a background in economics, so I'm always interested in, okay, what is the value proposition? Where is the pain point? Where does my product stand above someone else because I can make your life easier? And I think for sales I really hammer home like they have to almost be the smartest people in the room because they have to think on their feet and they have to start listening and pitching value. Like it's easier to say, hey, listen, I'll give it to you for 10 cents cheaper than the next guy. Great, bing, bang, boom, done. But the reality is that there's hidden costs, and that cost that people see is like, what's your time that you spend? How much time do you spend putting a round peg in a square hole? Where is your loss due to inefficiencies? So that's why I tie sales into product, especially in our industry where you're in the middle of the most important aspect of a business, how they get money in, how they get money out, how they pay, I take a completely different approach to sales where it's almost the product is the salesman.
It sounds like you're talking about a consultative selling process, are you?
Yeah, it's kind of that. I struggle to define it at times too, because even when we started the company, my co-founder, he was in sales, but he didn't know anything about payments. So it was like, I have to be explaining this is how it works and you have to understand it. And eventually, the key is that don't take what I tell you as just tell someone else. You have to start putting things in your own words because it will flow naturally. And then your job is to help the others connect the dots on where our value is for their problem. And that's really what we try to do. If we have a better product, it makes it easier.
Absolutely. I mean, everybody likes to be really proud of and feel passionate about what you're selling. And in Canada, let's acknowledge the elephant in the room. In Canada, we hate to talk about the word sales.
Yeah, of course.
But at Tangible Words, we really want to talk about revenue growth and sales and embrace it because it's what drives our economy and it's what drives jobs and everybody living life. We're stuck with capitalism for now. So what I'd love to know more about is what are the metrics then that you look at to know that you're doing well? Because you mentioned, providing value, cost benefit ratio, where are you losing time? What are some of those data points that you've been following in these years of success?
So I thought of it as we said, okay, who's the most important company in our space? That was Stripe. What do they do right? What do they do wrong? And how do we compete? And since I'm product centric, and I believe that having a good product reduces downward pressure on pricing, the most important metric for me is profit. I know a lot, especially in tech and fintech as well, revenue and EBITDA are the most important things in the world. But for the first few years of our company, the most important thing for me was profit, because if I don't have profit, I can't hire more developers to build it. And the more developers I put on it, I have a stronger product, which then again further reduces downward pressure. I solve more problems. So for the first few years of our company, I was interested in acquiring profit more so than revenue. And to do that, it was our product right now fixes this problem. Who can we sell to? Target. And then invest further. Now we have a wider net of whose problems we solve, and then we target those. And it just sort of keeps shifting and shifting in that direction. Sales is the most important thing. And luckily for us, because now we're at the point where I think we maybe spend less than $500 a month on marketing. But we're not suffering for opportunity. Our actual biggest problem now is moving deals past sales to integrations and going live. That's where our biggest backlog is
capacity and operations, basically.
Yeah. And so what I'm looking for right now, and obviously this will shift as the company grows from as we finish our raise that we're in the middle of right now. Literally before this call, I was working on something on a term sheet, and then the next point is to then become revenue focused, because the reality is the market. Then once you've sort of gone past being self-funded and now you've raised, as much as I'd like to think the most important metric in the world is profit, I think there's a shift in the company that goes to revenue, because then you're at the mercy of the market and you kind of play by their rules. But to get to this point, I had to be very profit focused.
And so you were profit focused. You only have one sales rep, which is one of your co-founders, other than the work that you're doing. As you launch into the United States in January, will you need to hire more sales reps?
Yes. I think my goal with hiring sales is I want them to be very smart and sharp. I also want to give them the best tools possible, and that is the product, right? And the U.S. is a way more competitive market than Canada. So we thought long and hard about how we structure it and structure it for success, whether it's having sales engineers, because we have a partner portal that allows us to sell directly into SaaS businesses. And then the other is sort of like the direct and sort of targeted markets with our existing sort of like, here's our value prop in these industries. And hopefully we can find key people who have a book of business or some sort of knowledge where it's going to be more natural how they speak about it, like how their cadence isn't forced. It's like, hey, I might know someone there, or I can speak very clearly because I know your problems even before going into the conversation. So we have like very clear guidelines of what we're looking for.
So your focus on hiring reps is somebody who already has an existing network in the space that you need to work in and who can follow your consultative selling process, if I can use that term.
I don't even care if they have sales experience. What I care is that they can understand and learn and grow. And that they will start them in sales engineering positions. Like it is like that self-started mentality. So yeah, like we're looking for like people who at least can have a foothold and start more so than, if they have a book of business, we would rather have less salespeople, but more specialized than just like a room full of people and hope some of them make it.
Have you set any retention goals on these new people that you want to hire? Like, what are we talking?
Yeah, we're going to hire 6. And the idea is like, they'll have very clear targets and like their industries and like their verticals, because it will overlap with their existing knowledge.
Is there a ratio you follow on that note? Like for their, you're paying them this much and you're expecting them to make 4 times, or how do you figure that out?
So I have them there. I have an Excel spreadsheet.
Nice.
That outlines sort of like, okay, I believe it works on a curve. And this is what I've tried this before. And, you bring in one salesperson and then they come in and, if their salary is, let's just say $6,000, if they bring in by like month 4, they bring in that $6,000, great. They start paying for themselves. By month 5, if they're trending up by another 1,000, that's good. You want them to start hitting about 2 times what you pay them by 6 months. And at that point, it comes down, it's like, okay, if they're bringing in, depending on the type of client, you can assess if it's like, okay, what is my additional operational cost for that, right? Okay, well, do I need 1 extra person to support that? Okay, so we bring in an extra person, maybe month 6. If they're sort of trending it, they're going to start doubling what we pay them. By the end of the year, they should be at 4 times the revenue. But by then, it's not like I'm going to hire at an interval of every time they double the revenue, another person. There's a downward trend on the operational bandwidth as well. And also then you have to count, like, if you want to be a sustainable company, you have to incorporate tools that alleviate pressure on operations as well. And client support. So like we have like automated onboarding tools, automated, problem solving, so there's a formula behind how you have to think about it.
Which includes operational costs to carry them as a staff member or to deploy the product.
Yeah, and then the reality is it can all go out the window in 5 seconds.
Well, exactly.
Too, right?
How do you make sure that they stay for the first 6 months before they're earning, even above what you're paying them for the first 5?
So I believe we do have such an advanced product that can generate more revenue per client than any other one in our industry, given the nature that we've combined multiple services into one. Like we make more per client than anyone else because they use more services. So we know that it's like in demand. So it's really about making sure that we explain this to them and show us like, hey, your potential to earn here is far greater than anywhere else. And you're going to have an easier time selling because it solves more problems.
And is that because it sounds like you're sort of giving like a trailing commission for them if they do stay? Is that your model where they get a sort of base salary and then as long as they stay and their customer that they sold to stays, they get a trailing commission?
Yeah, so it'd be base plus commission, and then they got to go live, right? It's like, right. This only counts if someone goes live. So you've got to be, I don't want people who are just like, I'm going to give me paper signed and then move forward. It's like, you are still the person they trust, right? Even though we're going to pass some integrations and they like Zoom Rails, that's fine. But you have to sort of also be invested to get the information to help streamline that process as well, right? Because the quicker they start turning to make money, you make money, Zoom Rails make money, so we're all happy. I have no problem that if a salesperson was the highest paid person in the company, actually I want that. That's, if you're making money, I'm making money, and you're maintaining the relationship, that's all I can ask for. Selfishly, I know that the lift to decouple from our services is far greater because it, like the reality is some of our biggest clients, if they wanted to leave us, they would have to integrate 5 different services and that wouldn't talk to each other. There's not a central portal, and that's not really something anyone's done. Like we have a very, very, very good retention rate. So it's that sort of, put all those factors together. Yeah, I'm more than happy to pay a salesperson more than anyone else in the company if they perform.
So as long as their client that they sold onboards and deploys and they get their base salary, they're going to get a commission for launch
every month.
Every month, every month that they pay, they get more commission. So it's just going to grow for them and grow for them. So it doesn't matter that it tails off in terms of how much they make because now they're selling 4 times, so they're making a lot more anyway.
Yeah. So even on the commissions, like let's just say, like especially in payments, like there's profit based every month for the transactions. So they should be making like, let's just say 20% of profit for the first year, 15 for the second, 10 for the third, and then it kind of at the fourth year it's just 5% until either the sales rep leaves ZoomRails or the client leaves.
Right.
And that just continues on as is. Like, and that way it's like, for maintaining the relationship, staying accountable to the industry and all that, like making sure the client stays here and everyone is on the same page.
So they're in charge of customer success in that sense too, of retention.
They're in charge in the sense that like even though we have customer success people, the reality is the salesperson's always going to be the first person to get the email. So as long as you forward it, like I just don't want it to be like, I'm not getting paid anymore, I don't care. No, it's like everyone has a vested interest. And especially if someone is constantly selling, we'll give them all the tools, whether it's the product or the support in the operations team to succeed. But like they still have to at least have some skin in the game.
And how much time will you spend with them in those first 3 months, or will somebody from your company spend with them getting them to ramp up? Like, how do you know that's going to be successful, that they're going to know what they need to know in order to do the job independently?
So a lot of it is like we have a process for like the first 2 weeks. It's like you'll be on shadow with myself or the other my other co-founder Miles, or even our existing integrations team from ops who like do the integrations with clients. Like they're gone live, so you're going to see it because half of it's going to be the personal skills and like problem solving. The other half is going to be how are you going to understand our product and put it in your own words? How are you going to understand the technical stuff, right? And I'm fully aware that like there's not a direct competitor for us that is like, oh, it does this. Like we are kind of, it's an island to ourselves, like kind of the first through the gates to do this type of product within open banking and instant payments. So we try and like make sure they have as much knowledge as possible. We've even created we created a live demo account. When I say live, it actually moves real money in real time, but you can use your own bank account and you can see how it works and you can play with it, because at the end of the day, you're going to have to show this to people. And so start playing it with yourself, and then you can kind of get a sense and a feel. It's sometimes like with someone's like, hey, I got a new card game to show you. And you're like, oh, okay, well, how do I play Skippo? You're just like, well, you can start explaining. It's like, well, this is not confusing. Okay, let's just play a hand and see it. And that's the whole point. Is like, we're going to give you something yourself so that you can start playing with it, and then you can see it and then start developing your own cadence and your own software. And then we walk them, like, show us a demo. We ask them questions. We have sort of a questionnaire about, okay, what would you say if someone came to you like this? If I tell you this is my industry, what would you think the problem is? And try and just like work them up through it. Eventually it's like, you think you have a big opportunity, bring us on calls. We're here to support. If you have calls you want to start taking by yourself, that's fine. But we try and sort of, it's an easing process to get out of the nest. But it sometimes will take time, but you have to do it. Will
you give them a BDR, or will they do their SDR, BDR, or whatever you want to call it, work and account closing?
For now, like right now, like if we hire someone now, it'd be like, yeah, they'd have to do their own BDR. But our plan is in the States to bring one in. We kind of have like one tied to operations already. Because I kind of see operations as everything from onboarding, going live, like especially on the technical side, and marketing is actually part of ops in our team because of how the messaging and everything has to be so tight knit. Whether it's because we're self-funded or it's just that, it really is sort of. It's not traditional in any means the way that we do that, having marketing part of ops, but for now, focus on profit and trying to not waste money. I think it's all kind of tied together.
And you said you spend $500 on marketing a month. Is that included in your ops budget, or is that an additional?
No, that's just like I think whatever we give to Google.
Oh, for paid
or LinkedIn.
Yeah. And do you find those like paid media services are working well for you?
No, that's why I think it's because like we spend a lot of time looking through keywords and like, okay, what is no one doing? And we do something a little bit different, so we try and outmaneuver others. But the reality is like the biggest thing that we found that worked well is LinkedIn. It was like in like telling our story. I think one thing about my co-founder Miles is that he's very good at getting people to root for him. He's very, very good at getting he's a very likable person. I know maybe I'm the curmudgeon and there's a balance of the two, but he's very good at that storytelling aspect and positioning himself as being very likable. And like, this is really like, and sharing like the journey and like our milestones. And yeah, it's, and that's always been like a really big boost for us. Hey, when we said when we talked about like how we, hit a milestone in processing billions, it was one of our most liked posts, and it generated more interest in our company from people who like reaching back out or wanted to learn more, because it gets shared and gets eyes. Like it's really, like I said, like LinkedIn's probably, especially during the COVID era, which our company is a product of, it was the only trade show in town. So that's where people's eyes were.
And how frequently was he doing that, or is he still?
I think we talk about the yin and the yang. I told him, I think the phrase I said, if everything's special, nothing's special. So you have to hold some stuff back, and like you can't post all the time. And because you post all the time, people get sick of you. Like, how can you miss me if I'm never gone?
Which is tricky with how the algorithm works, right? Because you got to get eyes on it, and you got to be in there for people to get eyes on it.
Yeah, but there's certain people when I see their posts, I don't read anymore because it's just But so I said, just make sure that it counts. And so it's like once every month, there's usually something that we post, and we have a marketing person who tries to be more clever about sort of the content we create that would potentially catch eyes. Especially in software and fintech. Oh, it can just be so stale. Maybe because, I have a bit of the DIY mentality from when I would run punk shows in my teenage years. I kind of think, we could do things differently, and like we could do it ourselves. And it doesn't have to exactly look and feel like everyone else, because then it just gets lost in the ether. And so we try different things so that people can recognize us, and it's worked, I guess. Like I don't think, the fact that we've self-funded this company with one salesperson over the last 4 years to like about 8.5 million in annual reoccurring revenue, pretty proud of.
Yeah, you should be. That's fantastic. And I mean, let's talk about, do you agree that people aren't always motivated by money in terms of sales reps, and how do you have a plan for how else to motivate them?
Well, the smart ones would be motivated to turn some of the money into equity. I think some of the smartest people I've ever met in sales went to companies where they thought they were in like a transition phase from startup to becoming a real company, and they needed someone to put the product in front of other hands and position their comp structure as equity plus, whatever it takes. Because over time, those little bits of equity in companies that you basically help get revenue to, whether they sell or not, that is what really can build generational wealth. As much as being a really good salesperson and making $250,000 a year is fantastic. But my biggest regret is that I worked at a company prior, and it was only after that I found out that they sold for 9 figures, but like a big portion of that revenue came from me. A big portion, like enough that if I owned a small piece of it, it could have been life-changing for me.
Yeah.
And that's why I was just like, it's a good feeling to feel like you're the highest paid person in the company. But when that company goes, you're not the highest paid person anymore. And that would be my life lesson. And that's what I would tell any salesperson is like, if you can see that and you can want to be part of this, then turn some of the equity. That's great. I'd be more than happy to do that.
Will you be rolling out an equity structure that they can buy into at a certain point in time, or when do you think you'll assess that? Is it a 1-by-1?
No, well, so right now, like in our company, it's like there are 3 big shareholders, like the 3 founders, but then there's a period below of just like 10 or 12 existing employees who've gained equity through just quality of work, been here a long time, so. And even in our sales structures, like I have it written out already, like this is what it would be. It's like, if you can hit this target goal, this is your goal. Like, obviously you got to pay for yourself, but you hit stretch goals, you can take path A or path B, and obviously we're open for conversations on a path C, but I would like that to sort of be, it's like, hey, if you sell a lot and you want to make sure that, hey, this is going to be worth it for you, because obviously, like, we should not, like, I'm not going to make any bones about it. I'll be completely honest. Like, this company is built to be valued in the market. And I don't think I don't want a job for the next 20 years. I want to build something that is valuable that others will compete to purchase. And so when a salesperson knows that, I don't want them to think, oh, their revenue would go away from comp structure. It's like, no, you have a chance to be part of it when there is, the transaction of transactions at the company.
And what recruitment tools will you use to hire your reps? I'm interested in that as well.
Well, right now, I have no idea. And I say this because Yelena, who I'm going to give a shout out to, who's been with the company very early on, is our HR person. And she went on mat leave 2 weeks ago. And her strong suit was hiring. And she understands, like, our founders and the profiles of the management team of what they're looking for. She would be very good at doing that. So I don't really have an answer on that. I know that right now I'm kind of going through my existing Rolodex of people I know and kind of asking for help. I know that as we were doing our raise, the investors that we've been talking to have all said this is something they could help with, which is great because it is something where they're also invested in the success of the company, and their version of success is not how great the product is, it's how much revenue it generates. And then all else fails on, what is that? I'm going to hire other people to do parts of my job and just pick up the briefcase and start selling.
Right on. And what software is in your stack other than Zoom Rails, obviously? What other software are you guys using that you rely on heavily?
Well, we use HubSpot right now, which is we tried other CRMs and we should have just went with them right away. That's the only thing I would say is that we tried a bunch of different things that tied in. But I think HubSpot is the one that works best on the sales side, especially we have other stuff, we have CRMs for risk management. We have CRMs for and we had our own custom one with Monday.com that tried to tie a bunch together, and it was okay. It wasn't bad. But then there was no sales or marketing effort to it. And then we moved to another one, and then it was okay, well done. It really lacked the operational side and the risk side, that depth. So now we're just okay, we're just going to go to HubSpot. We'll bite the bullet on the cost, and it's something you just don't have to worry about anymore.
Did you know that we're a HubSpot Platinum Solutions partner?
I have no idea.
Okay, we got to have that conversation after we're done this. Very cool. And at the end of this year, at the end of 2024, where are you going to be? What are the things you're going to be looking to have seen happen?
Oh, this is the big year. This is the year where I shift focus from wanting the best product I can possibly build to just becoming a revenue machine. So every year we've gone either 150 or 200% growth. I would want 400 this year. I know that's a big number given that the economics in the market right now are not great. But if I've said we've probably put about 5% of our effort into sales for the last 4 years. Most of it has gone into product and kind of tying what we need to get the product to and how we need to get that into sales. But now it's okay, if we're going to put 25% of our resources in it, I'd want the same return, right? If we were putting 5, I want another, every 5% should double, right? So, and that's where we're at, and especially as we enter the States, which is a 10 times market than Canada, that's my goal.
What would be the leading lights on okay, now it's time to hire sales rep 7, 8, 9?
That's a good question. My big problem is that pipelines can just be complete fugazi nonsense. Hey, I only care what gets signed and pushed through in live. But if I'm starting to notice that the traction we're having through our partners and the traction that our sales guys are having is greater than their time bandwidth, it's okay, it becomes a time question. I'm also starting to notice that our product solves more problems in specific industries that we're not targeting. That's when it would probably be time. Some people don't mind working especially in sales when you have like an uncapped commission, working hours that are beyond the traditional 9 to 5. That's fine. And others don't. And that's a personal choice. As long as everyone performs, that's fine. But as we can but if the time bandwidth that they have and there's still money on the table, that's when we have to make that as like, okay, it's time to bring in someone else.
Amazing. And you use HubSpot and you mentioned Stripe. This is my last question for you, by the way. You mentioned Stripe, but somehow Stripe got the go in with HubSpot on HubSpot before HubSpot Payments. It was like the only software that you were allowed to use with HubSpot quotes. Were you part of that conversation or bidding on that? Or
No, absolutely not. I wish. Like Stripe is the goat of payments as far as I'm concerned. The original plan for Zoom Rails, I've wrote out 3 things that Stripe did well and 3 things they didn't do well. And these are the things I'm going to target. Like that's the big question I deal with every day is like, I can't outspend them on marketing, can't outspend them on sales. And this goes for most companies too, especially when you're a startup, right? So where's my spot? Like where can I outmaneuver? Where can this product fit that they don't? And that's sort of like the ongoing board game that you're constantly playing in your head is like, okay, first rung on the quest ladder is like, the company kind of like you in the same geographical area. And then you go to the next, but Stripe is at the top of the pyramid. So that's the bar that I judge success in payments.
some of the best relationships I've had in business have been the really open and honest ones to be like, hey, we're not getting this all right. We don't know all the answers. Can you help us figure it out? Vulnerability isn't something that people grow up with and are naturally good at. I think it's something you have to work at. You have to really consider your ego. You have to do a lot of reading about leadership. You have to think about how to put other people first because it's not our natural inclination, certainly not as kids, right? We're always trying to think about our piece of the pie and if it's bigger than Sammy's next to us. But when you get into this position of leadership, it is your job, it is your calling to really be creating a space that other people want to work for you. You know, as Ryan Halliday says in Ego is the Enemy, you're clearing the obstacles for other people to feel supported and be successful in their roles. Ultimately, everybody wants to feel good at work. And I think when you're hiring salespeople, one of the best ways to make sure that they can feel good and successful at work is that you're providing them the tools and the training so that they feel like they can be successful in this role. Time and again, I've seen too many people quit and leave sales organizations because they came in and inherited chaos. And the salesperson, maybe the sales leader wasn't particularly good at sales themselves, and they thought hiring a salesperson was going to be the ultimate answer. As in, I don't know how to sell this thing. Maybe you can get out there and figure out how to do it. That rarely works. Ultimately, you need a blueprint. No person is going to be able to come into an organization and figure out how to sell this thing that you made up. So I think it works best when a sales leader knows how to sell things and then they are able to relay that knowledge to somebody else and say, these are the tools that I use. This is the way that I do it. These are the things that resonate. This is what people are buying. And when you can distill even just that very simply, the training doesn't need to be so expansive if you're hiring a good fit person who is also committed to those same goals of growing the company and providing the service that's going to really help people out in the marketplace. And I would advocate for starting with a 1-to-1 ratio. You know, you've been out there selling, and when you're ready to hire and you know that you can sustainably take a risk and expect it to take at least 6 months to get that person in the right fit, and you may even go through a couple of salespeople, you probably want to make sure that you just have the revenue to sustain the experiment of hiring that first person and seeing what mistakes you're going to make as a leader, because as a small business, you're typically going to make them. Nobody comes into this role perfectly ready to do it. So having that revenue length ahead of you to be able to be like, I have 6 months, maybe 9 months to do this. I have capacity and time because I'm not involved in operations anymore, let's say. And I have the capacity and time in order to help this person learn this role and to coach them and to make them independent. Ideally, you get that person up and running in 90 days where they're starting to run demos and at least tee up deals that you can help them close. I think 90 days is a great benchmark for somebody as independent and able to now hold calls without the original sales leader. And really, you're spending those first 30 days taking them along to meetings with you, maybe the next 60 days trialing a few of them leading independently and giving them coaching and feedback, and then 90 days doing more of that, and then heading towards independence. And I think software tools like HubSpot that allow you to continually listen in and provide coaching on recorded calls can also be very powerful for that sales leader to make sure that there aren't things that you forgot to train them and that you're having consistent touch points to touch base and help each other grow. Whether you're the leader who needs a little bit of coaching in the way that you're training or the way that you've been doing business, or whether the person is the new sales leader and they need a little bit more coaching on something that maybe you forgot to explain as the sales leader, or maybe something they just don't know yet. I think if you've got the revenue space to manage the experiment of hiring the new team member, and you have some training or a path and a timeline as a metric for training of the things that you're going to definitely teach them, the scripts you're definitely going to let them use, the way that the sales process definitely works, that's a really good place to start. To alleviate the fear, you need to have that money, that process of how the sales work, and I think you need to also know what you're looking for in another team member. We use tools like Crystal Knows to help us identify good fit people, and then we tweak and refine based on experimental time and seeing how people fit in. I think it's also really useful to know what your values are as an organization, because sometimes there are the skills to do the job, but there's also the cultural fit within the company. And those are often latent things that people don't describe. And once you uncover them in your company, it's very empowering for two people to find each other and be like, yes, I want to work here. I want to do these things with you in this marketplace.
Find more episodes of the Company Growth Podcast on YouTube or wherever you listen to podcasts. And if you've got a company growth story you'd like to share, reach out to Tangible Words. We'd love to hear your story and use it to inspire others to beat their own company growing pains. Until next time, thank you for listening to the Company Growth Podcast.